So some of the layers that I start to add right from the beginning, the most obvious one is, okay, if you can do this isolated from 8 feet away, let's add a little distance. Let's add this and make this just a little bit more difficult for you by, instead of 8 feet away, can you now have your feet wide apart 9 feet away? Well, that's not that much difficult, or more difficult. So applying the habit that you build at 8 feet isn't that, shouldn't be that big of a challenge at 9 feet. So you're finding now this sweet spot where the new habit is a challenge that the player can meet, but not so challenging that they can't do it ever, and not so easy that it's not challenging their abilities. We want to grow, but we don't want to grow so quickly that it's overwhelming. So testing, all right, we can do it well at 8 feet. We can be in the correct position, and we can start to get good results at 8 feet. Can we do it at 9? Good, that's progress. Can we do it at 10? Can we do it at 11? Those aren't that much harder. Can we do it at 12? No, all of a sudden we don't get the results. Perfect. Now we need to know that we know that we have to practice between 11 and 12 feet and in that range. So there's no sense jumping to 16 feet. If you can't do it at 12, you're certainly not going to be able to do it at 16. And there's no sense going into 8 because that wasn't enough of a challenge. You've just identified that this is the level within this layer that we need to practice at. So adding distance is the first way. Then when I'm isolating the skill, I'll give a player, I'll allow them to shoot every 30 seconds. Take 30 seconds to set up. I don't care. Just do it correctly. Build a better habit rather than a habit that continually holds you back. And so as they improve, we're adding distance and we're adding a little bit of speed, and we're not jumping from, okay, I've taught you how to do this, now do it at game speed. It's more, I've taught you how to do this. I'm going to give you the time to get good at doing this thing, even though it's uncomfortable, and I'll give you the time to make it comfortable, and then I'll slowly start to apply it into closer to game speed as your skills grow. Now, there's a couple of really important reminders that I want to make sure that you're aware of. Start with simple ideas. Don't go back as far as you need to. Strip away as many layers as you need to help the player do something differently, okay, and get comfortable with it. And when you can do that, when you back up, I shouldn't say back up because that implies distance. When you strip away all of the layers and start from square one, then you're allowing the player to constantly make progress. And if you try to only jump back halfway, even if they're able to execute well in the beginning, they're eventually going to hit a stumbling block, and you may have to go back beyond the halfway and continue to pull away layers. And it feels very negative to players at that point. But if you can just take them back to the beginning and allow them time to grow, you're always moving forward and testing at times, and maybe you need to take a small step back rather than trying to jump halfway into the process and go, shoot, I should have started from the beginning, and now the player has lost trust in you. So try and create a positive experience and avoid regression, but feel willing to test at the same time. I'll very early on in the process describe to a player, like, hey, we're going to see, like, we're going to constantly be testing. Are we ready for more? Because I don't know when a player is going to be ready to take the next step forward. You're going on your intuition and your experience, and you'll make wrong decisions at times, and that's fine as long as the player is aware. Hey, we're going to let's try this, and if it doesn't go well, no problem. We'll just determine, do we need a little more practice, or do we need to dial it back? But let's see if we're ready for a little bit more. And sometimes they'll say to you like, oh no, that's too hard, I can't do it, that feels weird. And perfect, so go back to pulling away a layer. And throughout this, you'll start to notice I start with the simple. When we add movement, which is going to be the next thing that we talk about, the first movement I start with is towards the rim, because it's at least generating energy in the direction we want the basketball to go. And then slowly with time, I'll add in, okay, now can we move laterally to the side? Can we move backwards? Can we rotate? And I always start with the simple and try and grow from that point. Now, with all of these layers, and I think we as coaches understand this, but I've seen tons of evidence that players do not get this, especially young players. You add a layer and the player thinks that you're practicing the layer. So they think that, okay, we're doing it faster. Good. What I'm practicing is the speed. But the reality is what we're doing is we're practicing the micro skill within that layer. So going back to, I want to get my feet wider apart when I shoot the basketball. Now I'm starting to add distance or speed or movement. I'm not practicing doing it faster. I'm practicing getting my feet wider apart while executing a faster movement. I'm not, later on we're going to talk about making decisions. You're not practicing the skill of making the decision. You're practicing the micro skill of getting your feet wider apart while making the decision. Or you're practicing the skill of getting your guide hand off the ball while making a decision or while catching a pass. So it's not just, when you add catches, you're not practicing catching. That's part of it. You're practicing the micro skill within that environment. So like I've talked about, the next thing that I'll add will be movement. I try to start with the most simple idea, which for me is hopping forward on both feet. We can argue the entire day whether 1-2 step or hopping is the best. And the reality is they're both great for different people in different environments. There's a couple that will be the most efficient in certain environments, but not efficient in others. What really matters to me is what is the player comfortable with, and if they have time, do that. Have at least a base amount of comfort with whatever the situation might call for, plus all the strange things that might happen. So if a player is most comfortable hopping into a shot, or let's go with this, they're most comfortable with a left-right 1-2 step, but they're coming off a pin down on the right side of the floor, curling to their right, that would probably call for an inside outside right left 1-2 step. So the thing that they're not the most comfortable with, well, that's great. We still need to be able to have a base level of comfort in that 1-2 step right left, even though it's not their preferred thing. So we still do need to practice it. But then we also need to practice what happens if the ball gets deflected and now they've got to reach outside their body, and now the situation lends itself more to a reverse pivot on the outside foot and into a shot. So strange things are going to happen because this is a dynamic game. We want to practice all of them, but we do want to know what a player is most comfortable with and allow them to do that when they have the time, because ultimately the goal is to put the ball in the basket, not use the correct footwork. So I start with hopping in, and then I will blend it into, so hopping straight forward into hopping left, hopping right. Can we get our legs set up at the same time, doing the same thing, pushing evenly out of the hop and into our shot with an even leg push so that we maintain our balance throughout the shot? Then can we start to do that as we rotate and progressively make just one step the movement? And I will do this. I'll spend a good week just working the last step of any movement, moving laterally. moving laterally with rotation, outside foot reverse pivots, all the different varieties, pushing off to a step back, but just the last step. Once the player, and learn to apply that micro skill that you're working on when you've added distance, when you've added speed, when you've added movement. Those are the three layers that I will try to add as quickly as I possibly can once a player starts to show proficiency in the new habit. And they comprise a huge ton, or a huge percentage of the warm-up that a player will do, even when they've graduated well beyond these layers. They'll still be done daily with players. So once we get into out of catching, or out of movement and just a single step, I'll start to add, can you catch the basketball? Okay, everything to this point may be done with the basketball in their hand. They may not, I'll remove having to worry about catching the ball or picking up a dribble, and just everything is done with the basketball in your hand. Can you hop forward? Can you rotate? And then adding in the catch. And again, I start with the most simple. I might go back so far that I roll the basketball to the player along the floor, so that they have, instead of a second and a half of travel time for the ball to get their body set up, they get 5 seconds. And of course they can get their body set up in 5 seconds if all they have to do is slide 2 steps to their left or to their right. Plenty of time to be mindful, plenty of time to make the decision. Even when I got to now worry about where the basketball is going to go and all the factor in all those different things, I've still got lots of time. And as they get better at that skill, then I start to take away the time by making a 2 or 3 bounce pass. It might bounce 2 or 3 times, and they've got 2.5 seconds to get behind the basketball, and adding in a speed of a pass in a variety of different layers to allow the player to have time. Now, as you get into this phase, play with the layers. Let me get away from the screen here. Play with the layers especially once players start moving and passes and dribbles start to happen. Meaning, if you're going to add the catch, allow them to slow down. You don't have to maintain the speed that you got to before you introduce the catch or the dribble. You may add the catch and move in. You may add the catch and slow down and move in. You may, you can add a little bit of one layer and take away a little bit of another to find that sweet spot of the challenge, a new part of the micro skill, but not so challenging that it's beyond their skill, and not so easy that it's not a challenge for them. Once we get into catches very quickly and around the same time, I will start to, let me get back to my screen share. I will start to introduce dribbles as well. Usually start in the same way, at the rim. Strong hand dribble, just at the rim. Right hand dribble, left foot step for a right-handed shooter. Can you get the ball down as you're taking the step with the left foot, catch it and execute wide feet, or be in a position to start to get your guide hand off the basketball? Whatever micro skill they're working on, can they execute it in this environment? And now things like catching a ball or picking up a dribble have their own little micro skills. And this is where it gets really challenging for younger players, where can you catch a basketball with the middle of your hand on the middle of the ball early? Or do you have to catch it here and then adjust your hand? Can you pick up a dribble in the same way? So there are now micro skills that the dribble or the catcher introducing, in addition to the initial habit that you were starting to build. And you've got to hold players accountable to all of them. Like, don't just practice the dribble, practice the habit that you were working on within the dribble environment. Once we start to get to that point and they're comfortable with the catch and the dribble, then we got to start to add a couple. And I always debate which order to put these two in. And quite honestly, the last one that we'll talk about, I'm challenging myself to incorporate far earlier in the process and figure out where the sweet spot for adding this last layer that we'll talk about in a second, but adding defenders. And it doesn't have to be a live defender. I will start with, again, the most simple thing, and tell the defender, make the cut uncomfortable. Don't let the shooter go exactly where they want to go. Just body up onto them and impact their cut a little bit. Make them fight for their position before. And as soon as they catch, or as soon as the ball's being passed, back off and give them the bandwidth that they need to focus on executing the micro habit. And as they get better in that environment, just saying, okay, you're allowed to now defend up until the catch. Now, when they catch, I want you to back off. Okay, and then adding in, you can catch and contest, but not block, or you can contest a catch, and we're playing live defense. And so you can add a defender in multiple different layers as well. And somehow I missed, so this is not supposed to come up. The last layer that I'll talk about is adding decisions. And the decisions that I focus on, like this is something I'm learning from Chris Oliver, who a lot of you know from Basketball Immersion. And I'm challenging myself to incorporate more decision-making earlier on in the process, and help players focus on executing the micro skill that we're working on when they don't know exactly what's going to happen in the situation. And Chris starts as simple as, I'm going to pass it to you. If I put my hands up, that means that you have to take a dribble. If I put my hands down, that means a shot. And so it's the outcome, where the shot comes from, is not predetermined. They have to read a cue. The player has to read a cue and then remember to execute those skills plus the new micro skill in that environment. And to be perfectly frank, I'm not that far beyond just those two cues. I'll use my body as a cue, where I'll toss a ball out to a player and close out shading to one side or the other. So if I shade to your left, then you're going to cut to the right. If I shade to your right, you're going left. If I'm coming square at you, that's your cue that there's a shot. And just challenging a player to find that the layers that are challenged, and make it as game-like as their proficiency in the new skill will handle. And so that's kind of the process that I go through. And just to recap, I start with the three simple distance, speed, and simple movement. Then I'll get into more game movement. So rather than just sliding it, or just moving laterally one or two steps, it might be a baseline drift, so the entire cut. Rather than a forward pivot on the left foot, it may be a curl cut off a pin down. It make it more game-like. Then I'll add catches and dribbles, and defenders and decisions. So those are the kind of the layers that I play with to find the challenge, the appropriate challenge, to help a player isolate and learn a new micro habit. So, oh shoot, I meant to forgive me for a moment as I navigate the shared screen option. Now, my hope with spending this time with you is that for free, you got enough ideas that you can kind of create your own process, your own progression of drills. If that's true, great. I want to help you even more. Shoot, those two weren't supposed to come up, only the first one. If you want even more help, please go to my newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com. I've programmed about 80 emails to go out to you over the course of a year, where there's a lot of teachable information, technical ideas, philosophical ideas, stories of players that I've worked with that I think you can gain something from. Plus, I've now worked it out where it's become like the old choose your own adventure book. And so in about the fifth email that you get from me, I ask you, what would you like to learn about, and give you about 7 different topics. And you can go into what I call a deep dive onto that topic, and then go back into the loop. And about 3 emails later, I'll give you another opportunity to choose what you want to dive deep into. That's another free, in addition to my social media and these webinars, that's one of the free options that I provide. Then I do have online products, or I've started to build my progression of drills into 7 workouts. So I have online workout programs for balance, guide, hand, and release, all sort of into one, and arc. Those were the habits that everybody kept telling me they struggle with. And so I put together 7 workouts that start really, really simple, help you isolate the skill, show you the drills that I do to isolate those skills, and with all of the teaching points that I would give to a player as they're learning these different micro skills. So there are 7 workouts. Each one of these programs have about 45 plus videos, about 20 plus drills and progressions, and about 2 hours of video content that are all the same drills and tips that I give to my NBA players. Those are usually $47 US for the online workout program, but I've put in a coupon code of social distance 10 to save 10%. So capital S, capital D, social distance 10 when you go to coachdavelove.com/store. Any of the products that I have available, you'll save 10% on those as a thank you for you guys giving up your time here today. And then just wrapping up, if I'm planning on being back in Sydney in end of September, and we've got some clinics organized through. I won't mention the gentleman's name just in case you're rivals with him, but I've got my friends that I've got clinics now organized through, but I'm always open to new locations and new contacts. If you'd like to come and volunteer at the clinic and sort of see how I run it and get a chance to talk in person or go for a beer, reach out to me through the newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter, and when you send an email reply, it comes to me. And so those are the ways that I want to continue to help you grow as a coach and learn from you as well.